Welcome to the Now to Next podcast, where every week we provide wisdom on how to press play after a traumatic pause. If you are starting up or starting over in any area of your life or your business, subscribe and listen as we share real life stories from actual people who have pressed play and are winning after nearly losing it all. And now, your host, Octoria Robinson.
Are you ready to press play today? Let's get rocking, friends. Join me in welcoming Pete O'Shea. How are you?
Hey, how are you? It's such an honor to be on the show, and I'm so proud of you. You're doing such great work for people. You're making such a difference in this world, and I'm just so honored to be with you today.
Oh my goodness, let me gather myself. You have really made my day. Thank you for your encouragement. For those of you who don't know Pete, I'm going to let him introduce himself, but we are in for a extraordinary blessing. Not only is he a talented, gifted, awesome man, but he has a story, my friends, that is going to rock you. Go ahead and share a little bit about yourself before we dive into your story.
Okay, sure. I was born and raised in New York, and I went to school for broadcast journalism, and I was going to take that route, and then I took a left turn instead. I spent 16 years as a full-time stand-up comedian. Then I got my back fixed in a radical way, which is what we'll talk about later today. I wrote a book about that called Pain Was My Friend. Wow. I'm a speaker and author now, and a ministry leader with my wife, Shannon. We have the Healing Tour. And we're out speaking all the time, telling our miracle healing stories to bring hope to people, really what they need. I'm a hope dealer. That's who I am. I used to pal around with the dope dealers, but now I'm the hope dealer.
All right. We got a hope dealer in the house. I love that. I love it. So to be a hope dealer, I gotta believe that your life at some point or another was impacted with some level of hopelessness, trauma, something that tried to hijack your life's purpose and get it trapped in a moment when there was so much more to live for. Let's go into that place, Pete, because again, that is the heartbeat of the Now to Next podcast. We bring stories of people who have lived through and on the other side of trauma, and we help our listeners press play in that area. Go for it, Pete.
Okay. Well, like many people, I had a good childhood. I was so blessed. My parents were wonderful. At 19 years old, I'm sitting still one day at a light, minding my own business. For probably the only time, though, because I'm kind of a butt-insty. But in this particular instance, I was minding my own business, and a guy in a Ford Bronco slams into the back of my car, and my life was changed forever at that point. I came to in the ambulance. When we got to the hospital, they told me I had something called a spondylolisthesis in my spine. I said, wait a minute, that doesn't sound good. I don't want that. Can I have something else? I can't even spell that. How am I going to have that? And what that basically meant is my L4 vertebrae was flying upward and over, and it was now laying on top of the nerve that was coming out of L5, causing tremendous pain and a lot of debilitation. All the muscles atrophied. Everything fell apart. And this doctor come in, they said they're going to take me upstairs. They're going to put me through this big surgery, 2-foot-wide incisions on both sides, screws in place, vagina, all sorts of mess. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. They said, well, if you don't, your whole body is going to fall apart, your left side specifically. You won't be able to go to the bathroom. You won't be able to eat. You won't be able to get out of a chair. You'll be in agony. You'll wish you were dead. It'll be a living hell. So I said, well, that still sounds better than the cockamamie surgery you're offering. It sounds barbaric, so I'll just take that. And I did. I didn't do the surgery. And everything they said came true. By the time I was 30, my leg dragged behind me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. It was horrible, horrible, horrible pain, nonstop, pounding, kill-me-now pain in my back and throughout most of my body. It was brutal and hopeless. I mean, you just feel every move, you felt it. Every movement of my life, I felt it, and it affected every relationship. I started using a lot of drugs. I was drinking. It was just everything you can imagine that became the living hell of my life, and then some, was where I was with seemingly, at the moment, no hope at all.
Okay, Pete. That was a whirlwind of a story. Let me make sure I understood you correctly. At 19, when your life should have been starting, it stopped.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. It's a perfect way to say it. When I just should have been getting started with life, instead, because of carelessness of a driver, who told me later he was looking for something for rent, a building. He wasn't even paying attention. And he slammed into me. My life was essentially over in so many ways. I could barely move. I was literally just a cripple who could barely get out of bed. I couldn't even move at all. I had to have somebody cut my meat and tie my shoe for me. And it was brutal. It was absolutely a living hell.
So something just hit me as I began to process the details of your story that you're sharing. And I know there's so many key points I want to cover, but this hit me. Talk to me about the emotional adjustment that you had to endure when your life seemingly was snatched from under you and you had to accept a new normal that was not at all instigated by a decision you made, but was like through violation of an accident.
Sure. Yeah, it's a very insightful question, because I tell you what, back then there was really no thoughts about that kind of stuff. We didn't really understand what post-traumatic stress syndrome was back then. Nobody bothered to ask a 19-year-old boy how he was feeling emotionally afterwards. They all want to know physically if I was getting better, but nobody bothered to check on the emotional damage that was done, and it just went unchecked for so long. And that was really the harder thing to overcome than the physical. It was the emotional and the spiritual pain that I was just having that I didn't have a release for. So I became sullen and angry and bitter. And again, all my interpersonal relationships were destroyed. My brothers and sisters, family members who just, stopped talking to me, turned their backs on me because I didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't understand the emotional outbursts I was having, or the rampant drug use. I mean, I did Vicodin, Percodan, Lieutenant Dan, whatever Dan you gave me, I take it, and then I was ruining everything, and I let people down. People looked up to me, saw me crashed, and they didn't understand, and I didn't understand it because, again, nobody dealt with that emotional. It's not even till now that I'm really dealing with that emotional part of it, and it took all these years later to probably figure that out. It was really, that's the most crushing part of it all, is the emotional and spiritual part.
Wow. So how long did you live without a voice or an outlet to express your emotions regarding this massive adjustment?
17 years I lived with it. 17 years of nonstop pain, suffering, debilitation in all ways, and really nobody getting it, nobody really understanding it, and it just going worse and worse and worse by the day. And by that time, I was 36 now, I was absolutely despondent. I was still trying to function. I was doing comedy and trying to live a life, which is such an irony. I'm making people laugh for a living, and I'm absolutely miserable. And I one night took the drugs beforehand instead of after the show, and I slurred my speech all over the stage, and they fired me. I got fired right there on the spot after 16 years working for that agency. And that was really the impetus to say, I got to do something about this. And so I went back to that same surgeon again and said, well, what do you got for me now? And now 17 years later, he offered the same exact thing, the 2-foot wide incisions, the screws, the plates, blah, blah, blah. And 17 years earlier, he said 50-50 chance of success. I said, well, what's the chances now? And he said, same, 50-50. Now, this is where I show you obnoxiousness and emotion. I was just so raw and angry. I started screaming at that man. I said, how can you still stink at this? What is the matter with you? Have you done any surgery since I left? How could you be so incompetent? But I was screaming, yelling at him. And he was screaming and yelling at me, just shut up and sign the paper. I'm going to carve you up. We're yelling and screaming at each other. It was really crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And I signed up for the surgery, but I never did get it. And this is the moment. This is where it all changes, right where we're at right now.
Wow. And I can't wait to share that with our listeners, but I have a few more questions on this side that I want to address. I often am tasked with asking the questions from the heart of the listeners. So in hearing again and processing and taking stock of the things that you've shared so far, another thought came to me. How does it feel, or how did it feel, to have a life you didn't ask for and one nobody gets?
It was a very lonely place to be. It was a very lonely place. My younger brothers and sisters, I went to their graduation and I didn't seem happy, so they get mad at me about it. And I didn't go to his party for his whatever, and so he's mad at me. But they didn't realize I was laying on an ice block and couldn't move, or that I was emotionally crippled and couldn't even get out of the house. So I was really just isolating as much as possible so that I wouldn't have to deal with anybody, so I wouldn't have to show. I couldn't hide it anymore. I couldn't hide the emotional despair. I couldn't hide the absolute rejection I felt from everyone. And so it was just an isolation. The last couple of years was just pure isolation. And that just makes it worse, too. Now you live in your own head, and guess what? Who gets to live in that head, too, tries to buy space all he can, too, is the enemy. And starts to run, you're useless, you're no good. You see, nobody wanted you in the first place. It wouldn't have mattered if you got to the action. You're still useless. There's nothing good about you at all. That's what God's running in your head. That's what you start feeling. And it really is, like I said earlier, more debilitating than the physical pain is.
I just got a picture in my head, Pete, of simultaneously when you got hit in the back of the car, that even bigger vehicle came and snuffed out your emotional legs. Those emotions that counter the negative ones that we use to move forward in our lives. And that, just rocked me because I'm with you. I believe that is something that is not dealt with, not addressed, or not as big of a concern as some of the physical things that are more apparent and you can see. So you said something else, Pete, that I went to find some statistics on before addressing it. In 2017, 47,000 plus Americans died of suicide. When you said, I had kill me now pain, if I be truthful, that sounded a little bit like I don't want to live, kind of the thoughts that are associated with suicide.
Yeah, yes, you're absolutely right about that. And I think I was on I'm going to have a chapter in my book called The Long-Term Suicide Attempt, in which I was doing everything, that the doctors told me not to do. And I was using as many different drugs as I could at the same time, and overeating and overindulging in as many ways as I could, because I had no will to live. It wasn't a conscious attempt. I wasn't waking up every morning saying I want to die or I'm going to kill myself today. But it was an unconscious thing where, again, the will to live had been so zapped from me that I was doing everything I could to wind up ending my life. I realized now I was doing stuff like playing Russian roulette on the streets. I was driving and I would switch lanes without looking and do stuff like that, not consciously realizing I was doing it, but you can look back at it now and say those were all suicide attempts.
Wow. Now, you coupled with that mental frame that you just gave us, you also mentioned using drugs and overindulging and drinking. How did that affect you?
It affects you far more worse because, again, it gives you that temporary high that you feel okay again. But then once it ends, the crash is worse, and it compounds every single time that you do that. It also has a negative effect, again, on all your interpersonal relationships. Everybody's sick of it. And when I finally quit drinking, the final straw was my grandmother, my sweet little grandmother, who used to feed me meatballs my whole life and loved on me, told me that I wasn't wanted in our family anymore, and that I had destroyed everybody's confidence, and no one wanted me anymore, that I was to leave and never come back. And that was earth-shattering to me. But, you just get to this point where you don't care anymore, and you can't get high enough. And I was, 10, 12 times a day getting high. It's really a brutal cycle that, people, I understand, everybody gets on people who have drug and alcohol problems. It's a disease, and it requires help. And we need to be compassionate to people who go through that. It's one of the reasons I tell my whole story. In my book, I tell everything I did. And it's embarrassing in a way, but it's also freeing because I know it's helping somebody else, because there's no reason for you to do that. Just ask for some help and get it. If I had just asked, say, listen, I'm, completely mentally unstable here and I'm emotionally devastated, please help me. But there's such a stigma attached to mental health issues that you're embarrassed to say it. And so you keep medicating. And each time you do, each time you have a hangover, each time you're jonesing for the next high, it just compounds and makes it worse and worse and worse.
Wow. So I'm going to ask a really just straight in your face question. with all the pain, with all the emotional devastation, with all the hopelessness, why didn't you just do it? Why didn't you just end it all? What gave you will inside of a seemingly hopeless situation to live and not to give into those thoughts of ending it all?
I still had enough people around who loved me. I still had enough people around who didn't give up on me. And so, they pretty much were propping me up and holding me up. I also, you find every once in a while a glimmering hope. You find still that you can be of value to people somehow. So when you help somebody else, you can stop and say, okay, wait, maybe I'm not as bad as what's going on in my head. And that happened a few times over the years where I had a chance to be of counsel, especially after I quit drinking. I really started to begin helping others who were having a hard time to quit drinking. I kind of became known as a drinking whisperer, so to speak, where I can help others, the really tough cases especially. And I still do that to this day. Now, when there's a very tough case that somebody won't stop, they'll bring me in and I'll help that person. And that was pretty much the only thing that kept me from just totally giving up, was that I had that. And every time I saw that I had value again, at least a shimmering hope, that would restore enough to keep me from doing something like that. And I'll also be honest with you, I'm a coward, okay? I was afraid of it, all right? I'm afraid of death. I'm afraid of pain, okay? So I'll be straight up about that. I think it's important to be transparent about it. I'm a coward, and as far as that regard is concerned, I'll stand up and fight for somebody, but to death, I'm afraid of it. I'm not going to lie to you. And so, you would think about it in your head, and you would say, I don't want to live. But then to actually do it, no, I didn't have the courage to do it, just to be honest.
Wow. I'm just imagining being stuck between not wanting to live, but too afraid to die. Wow. I imagine there are people who are listening today or will listen, and they're right where you were, Pete.
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah. How did things transition into a positive light from this point right here?
The big thing happened in a dream, although I won't call it a dream, it was a vision. I did sign up to go get that open surgery, and I was going to get it 2 days, but I went home that night, and I knew it wasn't going to work. I had no faith in that surgery 17 years earlier. I had less then, but I was desperate, But in that night, I had a dream, and God came to me and said, don't do it. Don't do that surgery. There's someone else that does back surgery different, that does it a better way, and I've been training him, and I've been training you. That's why you're out there speaking, and you're going to go, and you're going to find this man. You're going to tell him to give you not only the surgery, but a job afterwards as his spokesperson, so you can help thousands together. And then you tell this man that failure to assist you will lead to his eternal damnation. And boom, the dream ended just like that. And I came up and said, wow, this is God, And I found the man on the internet, and this was 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago. And back then, he was the only guy doing arthroscopic laser back surgery with a camera and all that kind of stuff. I was in New York. He was down here in Florida. And I sent him an email with everything, including failure to assist me will lead to your eternal damnation, which everybody told me not to put, like he's going to think you're crazy.
Yeah.
I said, well, if he does his research, he'll find out I'm crazy anyways. And besides that, that's what God said to put, so I'm going to put it. He sent me an email back 2 minutes later. How did you know we were looking for a new spokesperson? The guy just quit on Tuesday. No one could have known that. And I said, I told you God sent me. And he said, send me the film. So I did. He looked at the film. He said, this is the worst back I've ever seen. I can't help you. I'm sorry. I don't do this kind of surgery. I said, no, you're the chosen one. You're the one God told me about. I'm certain of it. And he said, okay, I won't leave you hanging. I'll literally invent the surgery just for you with my laser and camera. Come on down here and share the risk with me, and, we'll see what happens. And so I did. I came down, and he said, look, I'm not going to try to put it back like the other guys did. I'm just going to go down into the area where it's really bad, and I'm going to cut out a triangle out of that vertebrae, and then I'm going to stick the nerve through that channel, and it should work. And I said, what do you mean it should work? He said, I have no idea whether it's going to work. I've never done this before. I'm winging it, bro. He said, we got to go in there. Do you want to do it? I said, all right, yeah, let's do it. When do you want to do it? He goes, let's go right now before we both chicken out. And he grabs me by the hand and starts walking me back to the OR. Meanwhile, my left leg don't work, so he's dragging me like I'm a mop across the room, okay? And then he stops me and he says, oh, by the way, I can't knock you unconscious for this. I got to keep you awake for this surgery.
Wait a minute. You're awake the whole time?
Awake. He said, yep. He said, I'll give you some Versed to help out, but it's going to be 4 hours. It's going to be the worst pain you ever experienced. And I need you awake. I said, well, why? He said, well, if I cut the nerve, you'll never walk again. You got to tell me whenever I get too close. I said, I'm not a doctor. How am I going to tell you? He said, well, every time you scream really loud, I'll just back up a little bit and we'll get through this. And he said, you still want to do it? And I said, yeah. And he goes, why? And I said, because I told you God sent me, so let's go. And I had no fear at that point. And we went in there and he operated. And when it was over, he walked over to the other side of the room and he sent everybody else away. And he looked at me and he said, okay, tough guy, you want this job now? Prove to me it worked. Walk over here. And I slammed the top of the table and I said, how could you be so cruel? You know my leg doesn't work. Why would you say that? And he goes, no, I'm pretty sure it works now. Come on over here. And I stood up and I walked right to him, both legs working normal for the first time in 10 years.
Wow.
Right off the table. Right off the table. Okay, that's a miracle. Right? And because even if he got that nerve free, the muscle atrophy was horrific. I still shouldn't have been able to walk, so it was only God. And I walked right into the post-op, and then I went to work for him, and I helped over 8,500 people get that surgery also and get their lives back too in the 6 years I worked for him. And so, bam, there it is. That's the whole life changed in an instant, in a vision, in a 2.5-minute dream.
Wow, that was a miracle. Now I have two questions that are just right there. Did it hurt those 4 hours?
It was by far the worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. I thought I knew pain before I got there. That's why my book is called Pain Was My Friend, because I always was my friend. I would bring him along with me everywhere I was going. But 2 hours into the surgery, I said to him, I can't take it anymore. I give up. And he come around, he grabbed me by my soaking wet hair. I was crying and screaming. He said, you got me into this. You and your eternal damnation. I'm not going to hell because you can't handle it. So suck it up, cupcake. You owe me 2 more hours.
Wow.
And I closed my eyes, and I looked up above him, and in the ceiling tiles, I saw Jesus Christ, a full torso shot of Jesus Christ. And he was smiling and waving at me and saying, come on, man, come on, come on. And so I just sucked it up. It was by far the worst pain of my life.
My second question is, what age were you at this time?
I was 36 at that time. Okay, so I'm going to be 54 in a couple of weeks. And so I was 36 at that time.
So that was that 17-year mark.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's life been like post-surgery?
Well, again, I worked for him for 6 years, and I helped him get 8,500 people their lives back, which was very rewarding. Then I got into youth ministry. I did that for a number of years. And then I got on the Christian radio circuit, and I spent 10 years as the afternoon drive time guy at WTIS AM 1110 Christian Radio. The Pete O'Shea Show was on every weekday, drive time, 3 to 6, and I started doing Christian comedy. We did comedy shows in churches. We did over 75 shows, raised $250,000. Put roofs on churches, fed people. One of the shows we did, they took all the money, they flew to Thailand, and they bought every girl that would have been sold into sex slavery that day. They got safe and they got out because I told a couple of jokes on the altar of a church, which is by far the best night of my career. I've done TV, I've done Broadway, I've done Carolines and improv and all that. That was the best night of my career. And now, I put a second edition of the book out, Pain Was My Friend, and my wife and I, Shannon, we have the healing tour. Right now, we're out speaking and telling our story. She actually died and went to heaven. As a matter of fact, today's the anniversary, 2-year anniversary of her dying and seeing heaven. And she has a book called Scars That Heal, and my book is Pain Was My Friend, and we're out there, we're speaking in churches all the time, bringing people hope, showing them that they can get their miracle too. God's not out of the miracle business by any stretch of the imagination.
Amen. Amen. So as far as pain, have you been a pain-free since that surgery, or do you require medication to minimize pain?
No, I wouldn't say pain-free. The mind-numbing, pounding pain that I had before that, when I said kill me now pain, that's way gone and never came back. Thank God. And, but the muscles still get sore. I still have to manage my back. I still have to be wise about it. I have to walk every day an hour before I start my day, or else I can't function. I've got to exercise my back and keep myself healthy as I can. I've got to be careful. It will break down on me a couple of times of the year because the muscles are still very, very affected by it. And there's some permanent nerve damage as well because that nerve was trapped for 17 years. So from my left knee down, I don't have as much feeling as I would have everywhere else. You could, but it comes back a little bit at a time over the years. But it's still something I have to manage and keep an eye on. My back, I still have to always let myself remember, you got a bad back, I'm not in pain every day. I can function every day without an aspirin. But, I still have to be careful.
Such wisdom, such hope, such encouragement. I am beyond grateful to have had you on the show, Pete. I want to now help our listeners connect, follow, grow, be a part of you and your wife's journey and the way you guys are providing and spreading hope. How can they connect to you guys?
Well, first thing I want to tell everybody who's listening, listen, you may be down, but you are not out. Do not give up, okay? Never give up, because that's what we did, and that's what we preach when we're out there talking. And we go out and let people know. So they can go to Healing Tour, just put www.healingtour.us. We also have the Facebook page, The Healing Tour. You can get my book there as well, Pain Was My Friend, or you can go to painwasmyfriend.com and get the book. And we'll come to any church in the country who will have us. We don't ask for any upfront fees or anything from the churches. We just take a small love offering and sell our books afterwards just to cover expenses. And we'll come to any church, any conference, anywhere in this country and share this hope. Our stories together are powerful, and when we tell them, people afterwards will stay with us for hours after the show, hugging and praying and loving on each other. We make little support groups by the time we're finished with everybody, and we see hope now extended. And we've also done 6-hour video courses, both my wife and I. Mine's on hope, hers is on healing. So we can do 12 weeks of discipling even after we leave with folks, so that they really can start having that renewed hope. Hope is an acronym. I use it as humility, opportunity, power, and expectation. And when you have those 4 things together, you have hope. And when you have hope, you have a chance. Listen, God doesn't answer prayers based on want or even need. He doesn't care what you want, and he's really not all that interested in what you need. What he's interested in is you saying to him, I know you can fix this. I know you can move this insurmountable mountain in the front of me. I know you can do it. And when you tell him that with real declarative right, I do know you can do it, watch him do it right after that.
That just rocked me. You guys, as I promised in the beginning of this interview, was it not an impactful, inspiring story that Pete just shared? Get their books, follow them. There is so much more to their story than we had time to share today. If you're dealing with any type of chronic pain, whether it's emotionally, spiritually, or physically, I believe their testimonies are going to help you press play and live a life that's bigger than what you're feeling, have felt, what you've walked through, what's happened to you. You heard it from Pete. At 19, his life stopped. But guess what? There was a play that I believe God had in the books for him, and he's been playing ever since then. He struggled, went through you know what for 17 years, but he didn't give up. And guess what? That same fight that he had inside of him, even when he thought every will to fight was stripped from him because of pain, he still fought. And it's in you as well. You might be hurting right now. As he said, you may feel down and out, but it's not your end unless you accept it as your end. We believe that there's greater, there's more, there's wholeness, there's healing, but you've got to press in, desire that which is bigger than what you've seen, felt, or experienced for however long it's been. Remember, guys, as I close, trauma is not the end of your journey. Triumph is. Until we connect again, guys, have an extraordinary day.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast today. For all things Launch Now, log on to launchnowus.com for info on products, resources, and upcoming events. We are looking forward to connecting with you and enriching your life through our next episode. And remember, you have what it takes to press play. Have a super duper epic week.